I'm Joyce Oglesby with Beyond This Point Ministries. It's a ministry for women with preservation of the family as its ultimate focus. Perhaps you remember my daughter, Marcy LaHue. She brought your teens a riveting and motivational message about purity in her message, Hidden Treasure, Parts 1 and 2. Today she'll present Part 1 to a great message about Esther. Being a mother of two, she truly appreciates all the ins and outs and ups and downs, but especially the treasured moments that keep us connected as parents, not just to her kids, but in a parent-daughter relationship with her dad and myself. Marcy always brings to the table fabulous insight and spiritual depth. I'm so proud to present to you my daughter, Marcy LaHue, the mother of two of my 5 wonderful grandchildren. That's not braggadocious, that's just pure, boastful delight.
Holidays are great. I'm a sucker for holidays. Came by it honest. My family gets wrapped up in every one of them. I love decorating my house for holidays. I love all the activities that holidays thrust me into. And now that I have children, it's only gotten worse too. Making Christmas cookies, decorating the tree, going to see Santa, New Year's Eve parties, making Valentine's, dyeing eggs, Easter egg hunts, fireworks, going to the pumpkin patch, carving pumpkins, trick-or-treating, pilgrims, turkeys, bring it on. My mother-in-law's church asked me to speak at their mother-daughter tea, and their theme this year was your favorite holiday. So in trying to tie that theme into a talk, obviously I thought a lot about holidays. I was trying to think about why I love them so much, why we love them so much. I think most of us love them. Yes, they have their headaches, busyness, obligations, stress, but it's hard to find people who don't celebrate our culture's holidays in some way. I think the reason why I love holidays so much is because they are steeped in traditions. There are traditions that everyone seems to share. Christmas trees, eggs, Valentine cards, fireworks. But beyond that, every family establishes their own set of traditions. Those traditions give us a feeling of nostalgia, closeness with family and friends, and consistency. The very word tradition implies that there is some repetition to your activity. Every year, you can rest assured that at Christmas, we will put a tree up in our living room. Growing up, my family had some wonderful traditions and some rather odd traditions. For some reason we cannot fully explain, every year my sister and I would watch the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. This is a tradition I'm sure we share with many others, but here's the difference. We would sit in our living room floor in front of our TV with multiple packs of Big Red gum. Open a stick, chew it until the flavor began to diminish, spit it out, then open another piece, and repeat this until the parade was over, or until we ran out of gum. I have no words to explain this tradition. I don't know how it began. All I know is that we did it every year of our childhood until she went to college and I moved up here to Indiana from Georgia at age 13. Needless to say, whenever I put a piece of Big Red gum in my mouth, which isn't very often, it takes me right back to my old living room floor with my big sis watching Snoopy fly by down the streets of New York City. For many of us, holiday traditions can take us back to a simpler, worry-free time of our childhood, when we were oblivious to what was going on in the world, in our parents' bank accounts, at our parents' jobs, in our parents' marriages. And it also seems that no matter what is going on around us, holidays can help us forget our troubles and focus on our families and our faith. Christmas Eve has always been an extra special day for me. My father is a preacher, and before we moved up to Indiana, he was an associate minister at a very large church in Atlanta, Georgia. Every Christmas Eve, our church had a candlelight service, and my family was always in charge of decorating the sanctuary, setting out hundreds of candles all around the building. We would go after breakfast and spend all morning as a family decorating our church for this very special service. We would laugh and cut up. My sister and I would get a free pass to run up and down the aisles, in and out of pews, because no one was there to tell us not to. My parents loved that we had so much fun in God's house. We would go back home and then get ready that evening for the service. We always got a new dress to wear, which was exciting, and my sister and I would usually sing a special song for the congregation and then hear the story of Christ's miraculous birth. After the service, we would go to the home of the Mathises, a wonderful older couple who owned a local dairy that I think was one of the last to actually deliver milk to homes. Cookie Mathis was the dearest old lady. How could you not be with a name like Cookie? She would always make homemade vegetable soup, homemade bread, and freshly churned butter that she had churned herself, and of course, cookies and fresh Mathis dairy milk. When we left the Mathises, we drove around for a while looking at Christmas lights in the surrounding neighborhoods and then our own. We got home and sat in front of the tree, and Mom and Dad always got us a pair of pajamas to open on Christmas Eve. We would run and put on our matching PJs and come back around the tree, warming up by our wood-burning fireplace, and open our family gifts to each other and go to bed so excited that Santa was on his way. Oh, how I love remembering the simplicity and joy of my childhood. At Easter this year, my children, Booker, who is almost 3, and Georgia, who just turned 1 in January, dyed eggs 3 times, participated in 5 Easter egg hunts, and received 3 Easter baskets in a matter of 2 weeks. Hopefully, I'm not the only one whose child's Easter experience was similar. Well, my sister and her family came up to visit Easter week, and one of the 5 egg hunts we coordinated with our kids, her 3 and my 2. We'd had one for our boys before we had our 2 little girls 2 years ago, and it was perfect. The kids loved it. The eggs were full of awesome toys and candy. We felt like mothers of the year. Well, for some reason, when we went to buy the stuff for this hunt this year, we weren't feeling it. It just didn't seem to be shaping up as great as the last one we had had. And no kidding, on the way home from Walmart, she mentioned something about live baby bunnies. And we both looked at each other like, oh, now that would top last time. Wouldn't our kids be precious with live baby bunnies? What? We were out of our heads and realized it quickly. But yes, for a moment, we went there. What in the world were we thinking? And there it is, right there. What in the world? That's exactly what we were thinking. We were totally buying into the perversion and the secularization of the most sacred holiday on the calendar of a Christian. Now, don't get me wrong. Our family celebrates Christ's birth at Christmas, his resurrection at Easter, but did I tell my 2.5-year-old the story of Christ's death and resurrection as many times as he hunted plastic eggs this year? Please don't misunderstand me. I'm not poo-pooing the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus. I love those guys. I believe God allowed those figures to be a part of these sacred holidays to help our kids understand their significance and importance, and to teach us about giving and generosity. Santa is a good guy. I do believe the focus that's been placed by not non-Christians, but Christians on the secular icons and traditions of our Christian holidays is telling of a much deeper problem within our hearts and our culture. Sometimes it seems we conveniently forget God. Oh, we remember him the few hours a week that we attend church, or maybe even the few times a year we attend church. We especially remember him when we need something, but only when it doesn't conflict too much with what we want to do or where we want to go or what activity we want to engage in. Many times God just doesn't fit too nicely in the parameters of the culture that has been created. I have to share this with you because this is how amazing and cool God is. I've been studying the book of Esther. It's a Beth Moore study. It's amazing. I was asked to speak here today before I began this study and agreed. And I knew the theme and had been thinking for weeks about how to tie this holiday theme into a talk. The deeper I got into the study of Esther, I just kept feeling convicted about needing to incorporate some thoughts into this talk about holidays. I had a general direction I knew I wanted to go with this, but when I sat down to actually construct my talk, I looked in the concordance of my Bible for the word holiday. You'll not believe this, but the only 3 verses that were listed in the entire Bible all came out of the book of Esther. I mean, I got chills. That was my sign right there. God has laid this on me. and he has laid it on me not only for you, but for me. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the book of Esther. For those who are not, here's a really brief history lesson. The Jews had been taken captive years before, and some of the exiles remained in Persia when they had the opportunity to return to their own land. King Xerxes ruled over the Persian Empire. He got rid of his queen because she was disobedient, held a beauty contest to find another queen. Esther was a Jewish orphan being raised by her cousin. She was one of the hundreds of girls in this contest and was chosen to be queen out of all of the most beautiful young virgins in Persia. Enters Haman, the king's right-hand man, who devises a plan to kill the entire Jewish population in Persia. Esther's cousin pleads with her for her to save her people and herself. She struggles with this decision, but ultimately decides to take the risk and go to the king and try to save her people. It works. Jews were spared, and Haman, the bad guy, was killed, never to threaten God's people again. Esther is so rich with detail and irony and relevance. I encourage you all to revisit Esther soon. The part of the story I want to park on for now is about the Jews in Persia. They chose not to go back with their own people in the land God gave them. They remained and assimilated. They liked Persia. They felt comfortable in Persia, though Persia was not their home. Persia was not the home of God's chosen people, but yet God's people felt comfortable there. The God of the Jews was not the God of the Persians, and some of the Jews had forgotten who their God was and what he expected of them. Sound familiar? It's that whole frog in the pot of boiling water thing. If you throw a frog into a pot of boiling water, he will jump out. But if you throw that same frog in a pot of cold water, put it on the stove, and slowly crank up the heat, the frog will sit comfortably, getting used to the rising temperature until he boils to death. I tell you what, there are a lot of hot frogs around us, aren't there? I know I've been guilty of being a hot frog sometimes. But are we not like those Jews living in Persia? Have we not slowly gotten comfortable, accepted a little bit of this or a lot of that, knowing in the pit of our souls that God would not approve, and yet we allow it? We allow it in our homes, on our TVs, on our bookshelves and coffee tables, in our schools, and even in our churches. I'm talking to myself here too. Do not misunderstand me. I'm trying to get that plank out of my eye too. So what does God allow to happen in Esther to his people who need to jump out of that boiling water? He allows a weak king to take the throne, a man who is influenced so easily that he gets rid of a queen, holds a beauty contest to find a new one, and allows a conniving, ego-driven, hate-filled man to plot to kill an entire people, the Jews. And when the Jews heard of this plot, what did they do? They were devastated. There was great mourning among the Jews, with fasting, weeping, and wailing, Esther 4:3. Their children, wives, husbands, parents would all perish. The Jews in Persia were under attack. And why? Because they were God's people. Tune in next week to Beyond This Point Ministries, and we'll take an in-depth look at how Esther was used for such a time as this, and how you too can be used for such a time as this. May God bless your life, your home, and your families.